We're just getting to the peak of this mountain, and I am inspired to speak a bit about how this trip all started. When I was just finishing high school in 2007, turning into the year 2008, I had tried Salvia divinorum. I had used it quite a few times, and for my school project in English class, I wanted to do a research report on how the world is going to end in 2012. And so I got a book by an author named Daniel Pinchbeck that was called, if I remember correctly, 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, the giant flying snake in Mexican native mythology. And so in this book, Daniel Pinchbeck talked about Salvia divinorum, if I'm not mistaken, and he talked about ayahuasca and Terence McKenna. And so this was the first time I heard about Terence McKenna, and I became captivated by this character. And I got his book, The Invisible Landscape, which, if you try reading this book, even as an adult, you're going to have a hard time. This man uses the craziest vocabulary you could ever think of. And so I was making it through The Invisible Landscape. I read this book about 2012, and I really started thinking about ayahuasca, that someday in the future I need to try this. If these people are saying that this gives you some kind of insight into the future, then maybe I needed to take a look at this. In the end, from what I understood, in The Invisible Landscape, where Terence McKenna ate a bunch of mushrooms, drank a bunch of ayahuasca in Colombia, and there's a nice bird here. So he ate mushrooms, drank ayahuasca, smoked some vine that contains harmaline. You can read The Invisible Landscape if you'd like. And he said he was in contact with some kind of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional entity, and this other consciousness helped him develop his theory of time wave zero, where he had plotted mathematical graphs based on the first order differences between the hexagrams in the King Wen sequence of the I Ching, which is a Chinese book of fortune containing 64 hexagrams of 6 lines in each hexagram, where they vary in 64 different forms, where you can have one line full or broken. And with this binary hexagram code, you look at the differences between each of the hexagrams. And there's one called the King Wen sequence, where it orders the hexagrams so that the differences between each hexagram are the lowest changes possible, right? So if you go from like 6 broken lines to 6 full lines, that's 6 changes, that's the highest. If you go from 6 broken lines to 1 full line and 5 broken lines, it's 1 change. And so the way that you can order these 64 hexagrams, you can do it in a way where going from one to the next creates the least amount of differences between each of them. And the King Wen sequence, I'm not sure if it's the lowest, but it's one of the lowest out of, like, because you can order these things in millions of ways. And so they ran computer sequences to see where we can find the lowest first order differences, and apparently the King Wen sequence is in like the 1% of sequences that have the lowest first order differences. And so McKenna studied these first order differences, plotted them, put them on an axis of time, and said that in 2012 we were going to reach the maximum amount of novelty. Things were going to become so novel, and wasn't necessarily saying the world was going to end, but that novelty, newness essentially, is going to peak. Like we're getting to the peak right here. And so I think this experience that he had with mushrooms and ayahuasca is something that everyone can access if they take these medicines with a lot of intention. Whatever you want to find out, they're going to communicate it to you. If you want to write awesome poetry, conscious rap, they're going to communicate this to you. They're going to help you channel everything you want.